History isn't just dates and facts. It's power, fear, and moments where the world almost breaks. Welcome to Cinematic History Stories, where we don't summarize the past, we put you inside it. Subscribe and witness the moments that changed the world. December 17, 1895. Washington, D.C. Outside, a cold winter rain slicks the cobblestones along Pennsylvania Avenue. Inside the United States Capitol, the air is thick with cigar smoke, wet wool coats, and something far more dangerous, anticipation. Men lean forward in their seats. Pages stand frozen. The galleries are packed. When President Grover Cleveland's written message is read aloud, a silence falls so complete you can hear the paper tremble in the clerk's hands. Across the Atlantic, the British Empire still rules the world. But in this room, on this day, the United States is about to challenge it. Openly, deliberately, and with the implicit threat of war. Cleveland's words are calm, legal, almost polite, and then they turn lethal. The United States, he declares, will determine the rightful border between Venezuela and British Guiana. And if Great Britain refuses to accept that judgment, America will resist, by every means in its power. Every means. In the language of diplomacy, that phrase has only one meaning: war. The congressmen erupt. Cheers. Shouts. Desks slammed with fists. Democrats and Republicans, bitter enemies only weeks before, rise as one. In that moment, the United States is united against a single target, the British Empire. But the story does not begin here. To understand why the world's greatest empire nearly went to war over a strip of jungle in South America, you have to rewind to a time when the map of the world was pink, and Britain believed history itself was on its side. In the final decades of the 19th century, Britain stands at the peak of its power. Queen Victoria reigns over the largest empire humanity has ever known. The Royal Navy dominates every ocean, its coal-fired steel hulls enforcing a global order that has gone unchallenged since Trafalgar. London is the financial capital of the world, the place where currencies are priced, debts are settled, and empires quietly rise or fall. To the British ruling class, this dominance feels permanent, natural, inevitable. Across the ocean, however, another power is changing, quietly, relentlessly. For most of the 1800s, the United States is dismissed by Europe as a provincial experiment. A noisy republic obsessed with its own frontier. A country that spent 4 brutal years tearing itself apart in civil war, then turned westward, crushing indigenous nations to complete its continental expansion. But by the 1890s, that expansion is finished. The frontier is closed. And the energy that once drove wagon trains across the plains now has nowhere to go. America's factories roar day and night. Its steel production surpasses Britain's. Its railroads stretch farther than the rest of the world combined. Its population explodes with immigrants willing to work, fight, and build. The country is rich, powerful, and unstable. Economic booms are followed by savage crashes. The Depression of 1893 leaves millions unemployed, angry, and searching for someone to blame. National pride hardens into nationalism. Jingoism spreads through newspapers and taverns. The United States is no longer content to be left alone. It wants recognition. It wants respect. And increasingly, it wants confrontation. The collision between these two worlds, the aging British Empire and the rising American Republic, does not happen in Europe, or Asia, or the Middle East. It happens in a jungle. On the northeastern shoulder of South America lies Venezuela, a young republic plagued by coups, civil wars, and chronic instability. To its east sits British Guiana, a colonial possession inherited by Britain from the Dutch during the Napoleonic Wars. For decades, no one cares exactly where one ends and the other begins. The region between them is a green hell of swamps, rivers, insects, and disease, economically worthless and barely mapped. Until someone draws a line. In 1841, Britain commissions a German surveyor, Robert Schomburgk, to define the borders of British Guiana. His map pushes the British claim far to the west, deep into territory Venezuela considers its own. Most critically, The line edges toward the mouth of the Orinoco River, Venezuela's economic lifeline to the Atlantic. Venezuela protests. Britain ignores them. For half a century, the dispute simmers quietly. Venezuela is too weak to force the issue. Britain is too powerful to care. Then, in the 1880s, everything changes. Gold is discovered in the disputed territory. Not flakes. Not rumors. Massive alluvial deposits. Nuggets weighing hundreds of ounces pulled straight from river mud. British miners flood in. Settlements appear overnight. Suddenly, the jungle has value, and Britain moves fast. London formally adopts the Schomberg Line, then pushes it even farther west, claiming tens of thousands of additional square miles. For Venezuela, this is no longer a cartographic disagreement. It is a strangulation attempt. Control of the Orinoco Delta would give Britain leverage over the entire Venezuelan economy. Desperate, Venezuela cuts diplomatic ties with Britain. It appeals to Europe, France, Germany, anyone. No one answers. There is only one power left to turn to: the United States. In Washington, a former American diplomat named William Lindsay Scruggs begins a campaign that will change world history. He writes pamphlets. He corners senators. He floods newspapers with a single argument, repeated endlessly: Britain is violating the Monroe Doctrine. Declared in 1823, the Monroe Doctrine warned European powers against extending their colonial ambitions into the Western Hemisphere. For 70 years, it has been more theory than threat. America lacked the Navy to enforce it. But now, Scruggs' message lands at exactly the right moment. A restless nation, a wounded economy, a president under siege, and a British Empire that believes it can safely ignore them. That belief is about to prove disastrously wrong. The pamphlets circulate through Washington like sparks in dry grass. Senators read them aloud in committee rooms. Newspaper editors lift entire passages and splash them across front pages. British aggressions in Venezuela, the title screams, or the Monroe Doctrine on trial. The implication is unmistakable. If Britain gets away with this, then the Monroe Doctrine is a lie, and American power is an illusion. At the center of the storm sits President Grover Cleveland. Cleveland is not a natural warmonger. He is a conservative Democrat, a believer in balanced budgets and limited government, a man known more for vetoes than crusades. But by 1895, he is boxed in on all sides. The Panic of 1893 has shattered public confidence. Strikes paralyze railroads. Federal troops have fired on American workers. Republicans accuse him daily of weakness, at home and abroad. Cleveland understands something vital. If the United States backs down now, it will never again be taken seriously in the Western Hemisphere. His Secretary of State, Richard Olney, understands it even more clearly. Olney is a corporate lawyer from Boston, heavy-set, blunt, and utterly convinced of American destiny. When he studies the Venezuela dispute, he does not see gold or jungle. He sees a precedent. If Britain can redraw borders in South America at will, then nothing prevents Germany, France, or Russia from doing the same tomorrow. The Monroe Doctrine, Olney decides, must be transformed from a statement of principle into an enforceable law of power. In July 1895, Olney sits down at his desk in the State Department and begins to write. The result is not a request. It is not a plea. It is a declaration. The note sent to London reads like a legal indictment. Olney argues that the United States has the right, and the duty, to intervene in any dispute where European power threatens an American republic. Then he delivers the line that will echo across the Atlantic like a cannon shot. The United States is practically sovereign on this continent, and its fiat is law upon the subjects to which it confines its interposition. Its fiat is law. In one sentence, Olney claims supremacy over the entire Western Hemisphere. The note demands that Britain submit the Venezuela border dispute to arbitration. It demands a response. And it carries an unspoken warning: refusal will have consequences. When the message arrives in London, it lands on the desk of Prime Minister Lord Salisbury. a man who embodies the old world Britain believes still governs global affairs. Salisbury is aristocracy incarnate. Bearded, imposing, and supremely confident, he holds the offices of both Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary. He has negotiated with emperors and kings. He has managed crises in Africa, Asia, and the Balkans. The United States, in his mind, is not a peer. It is a former colony with delusions of grandeur. He reads Olney's note with thinly veiled contempt. The Monroe Doctrine, Salisbury notes, is not international law. It is not recognized by Europe. It binds no one but the Americans themselves. And this, he insists, is a boundary dispute between a British colony and a sovereign state, not a case of new colonization. In short, Britain has no obligation to listen. And so Salisbury makes a decision that will haunt him. He does nothing. The note is set aside. Weeks pass. Then months. Salisbury attends to matters he considers far more important: Africa, the Near East, the balance of power in Europe. He assumes Washington's outrage will burn itself out. That the Americans are posturing for domestic audiences. In Washington, the silence is interpreted very differently. To Cleveland and Olney, the lack of a reply is an insult. A deliberate snub. Proof that Britain does not consider the United States worthy of even a response. The resentment hardens into anger. When the British reply finally arrives in late November 1895, it is worse than silence. Salisbury's response is polite, precise, and utterly dismissive. He dismantles Olney's arguments point by point. He states flatly that the Monroe Doctrine does not apply. He refuses arbitration. He insists that Britain's claim, based on the Schomberg Line, stands firm. The message is unmistakable. Mind your own business. Cleveland reads the reply and explodes. To him, this is no longer about Venezuela. It is about national honor. About whether the United States will accept being treated as a second-rate power in its own hemisphere. He decides to escalate. Not quietly, not diplomatically, publicly. On December 17, 1895, Cleveland sends his special message to Congress, the one that brings the chamber to its feet. The message proposes the creation of an American commission to determine the true boundary between Venezuela and British Guiana. But the real threat lies beneath the procedural language. If Britain refuses to accept the commission's findings, Cleveland declares, the United States will resist British encroachment by every means in its power. The implication races through Washington in seconds. The United States has just threatened war with the British Empire. Outside the capital, newsboys shout headlines into the winter air. War with England. The Lion and the Eagle. Across the country, the reaction is electric. Old Civil War resentments resurface. Irish-American communities cheer openly at the prospect of humiliating Britain. Militia units begin drilling. The Navy Department quietly reviews war plans. For the first time since 1812, war between Britain and America feels not just possible, but imminent. And in London, the Empire awakens to a nightmare it never expected to face. The morning papers hit London on December 18, 1895, like a physical blow. Headlines speak of American rage, of Congress in uproar, of a president openly threatening war. In clubs along Pall Mall and Whitehall, men lower their newspapers slowly, disbelief written across their faces. Venezuela. War over Venezuela. Until now, the dispute has barely registered in the British public consciousness. It is a distant jungle, a colonial footnote. But suddenly the unthinkable is being discussed aloud: war with the United States. At first, the reaction is scorn. Surely this is bluster. An American tantrum. The Royal Navy rules the seas. Britain has faced down Napoleon. Faced down Russia. Faced down half the world. Why should a former colony matter? Then the reports arrive from Washington. The British ambassador cables home in urgent tones. This is not theater. This is not posturing. The American public is unified. Congress is inflamed. Cleveland will not retreat. The United States is prepared, psychologically, politically, and economically, for war. Lord Salisbury convenes his cabinet. For the first time, the empire's leadership looks at the board and realizes something is wrong. The admirals run the numbers. Yes, the Royal Navy is larger, but it is scattered across the globe, guarding trade routes from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean to the China Seas. To fight the Americans, Britain would have to concentrate its fleet in the Atlantic, leaving the empire dangerously exposed elsewhere. The army's assessment is worse. Canada is indefensible. A border stretching thousands of miles, lightly garrisoned, impossible to reinforce in time. If war breaks out, American troops would march into Montreal and Toronto within weeks. Britain could not stop them. Then comes the industrial math. American shipyards can build faster. American steel output is staggering. American manpower is virtually unlimited. This would not be a short, glorious war. It would be a grinding struggle against a continent-sized power. And then the real panic sets in. Finance. On Wall Street, the mere threat of war triggers a market collapse. British investors, deeply entangled in American railroads and industry, begin dumping assets. Liquidity tightens. Credit trembles. The City of London sends its message with brutal clarity: a war with America will wreck the British economy. The empire, for all its flags and fleets, is suddenly fragile. And then, history intervenes. On January 2, 1896, news arrives from South Africa. A reckless colonial adventure, the Jameson Raid, has ended in humiliation. British forces are captured by the Boer Republic. And within days, a telegram arrives from Germany. The Kaiser congratulates the Boers. It is an open insult. A warning shot. A declaration that Germany is watching and willing to challenge British power. In an instant, Salisbury's priorities reorder themselves. Germany is a mortal threat. America is not. Britain cannot afford enemies on both sides of the Atlantic. Splendid isolation, once a point of pride, now looks suicidal. The choice becomes unavoidable. In February 1896, Britain signals its retreat. Quietly, carefully, without admitting defeat. London agrees to arbitration. It is the blink. The nation that once dismissed the Monroe Doctrine as meaningless now accepts the premise behind it, that the United States has the right to intervene in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere. The details are negotiated. Face-saving clauses are added. But the substance is clear. Britain has backed down. The arbitration tribunal meets in Paris in 1899. The irony is sharp. Britain wins most of the disputed land. The gold fields remain under British control. On paper, London emerges victorious. In reality, it has lost something far more important. It has acknowledged American supremacy in the Americas. The consequences are immediate and permanent. Britain begins a strategic withdrawal from the Western Hemisphere. It abandons opposition to an American-controlled Panama Canal. It pulls its naval squadrons back toward Europe. It supports, rather than resists, the United States war with Spain in 1898. When Theodore Roosevelt asserts America's right to police the hemisphere, Britain nods and steps aside. A new partnership is born, not of friendship, but of necessity. When World War I comes, it will be American money, American industry, and eventually American soldiers that keep Britain alive. That lifeline exists because, in 1895, Britain chose survival over pride. For Venezuela, the outcome is bittersweet. It is spared British expansion, only to fall under American dominance for the next century. The Monroe Doctrine proves what it always was, not a shield for Latin America, but a gate, guarded by the United States alone. And so, in a forgotten jungle borderland, the 19th century ends. No battles are fought. No ships are sunk. No shots are fired. Yet an empire retreats. The British lion does not fall, it steps aside. And the American eagle learns, for the first time, that it can command the world and be obeyed. History often remembers wars. It forgets moments like this. But this was the moment the torch was passed. Quietly, reluctantly, permanently. History doesn't end when the screen fades to black. The consequences live on, in borders, in wars, in the world we inherit. If this story changed how you see the past, stay with us. Subscribe to Cinematic History Stories, because the most important moments in history are often the ones that were never meant to be remembered.